Now I open the floor to question and answer session. Any questions? Please feel free.
I was just wondering what the perspective of the GSN network was on the universality principle within international law. The aim of the network is to improve and develop judicial cooperation between the global north and the south. And I was just wondering what role you think the universality principle has in that, in terms of beating cybercrime, which was mentioned, and just international crime syndicates that cross jurisdictions. Like, do you think it is something that might be useful to combat such crimes like these and to develop collaboration, or if you think that it goes against state consent and the consent of judiciaries too much to be an asset?
So probably the question is for me, I think.
Yes.
So regarding universality, I mean, I think it's a very good opportunity to explain what I couldn't explain in the beginning because of the shortage of time. If you go to our website, like I said, there are regional focuses and then there are disciplinary focuses. Within the law, we do focus on international law, torts law, constitutional law, the legal skills and methods. If you go to our YouTube channel, there are around 72 videos, each video 1 hour, and 1 hour consisting of experts from across the world, not only from the UK. And very diverse panel, by the way, in terms of gender, color, race, religion. And that's, I think, the best thing about the Global South Network. You name any religion, you will find the person. I think if you go to the last 10 videos, even a rabbi, you will see there, and he will appear, and I think I admire his contribution. Probably he might not be aware of the English language, but still that slides and everything he is able to know. So universality concept is completely visible in there. And all those sessions, there are a lot of sessions focusing on the cybercrime, the artificial intelligence, intellectual property. We do focus on that. If you go to that page, every section has its own page, has its own team, and every activity, there are different activities, recording of those activities have been uploaded there. So every section and its team focuses on that particular area within the law and across disciplines. So it's very much, some people within particular disciplines, for example, law people complain, there's nothing about politics, there's nothing about sociology, anthropology. I think it's completely wrong. If you look at focus, pay attention to the Global South Network, I never mentioned it is Global South Law Network. I never mentioned it as Global South Political Network. The reason being that that's our main aim. The aim is simple and it's written in bold letters on our website, empowering people from or focusing on the Global South through knowledge exchange and sharing good practices. And it's across disciplines. And that is something we want to contribute to groups and associations like the Judges Association, Commonwealth Magistrate Association, European Constitutional Court Association, Islamic Constitutional Court Association, that these associations, like rightly said by Judge Mirza, that are exclusively, not completely exclusively, but more, predominantly they focus on the judges to judges cooperation. So that is what we can really add, and we do hope, we are looking forward to add to that in order to create a bridge between the judges and the policymakers, civil society actors. Civil society actor means the journalists, the heterogeneous groups of society, the journalists, the academia, the students, scholars, and professionals. And I think that's all I have got to say. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was very interested in something which the Honourable Justice here said from the Maldives. She said that the opportunities to cooperate were endless, I think was the word that she used. Because they're also endless, how do you prioritise those key bits when there's so much pressure on judicial time, I'm sure across all these jurisdictions? How do you prioritise a particular issue?
Well, we have limited resources. Our budget for international relations is £40,000 a year. That's not very good money. Doesn't pay for terribly many flights. We draw up a strategy. We discuss it, in fact, have regular meetings with the Royal Courts of Justice, which is the these matters are dealt with for the Courts of England and Wales. And we broadly divide responsibility between us. We obviously have a particular interest in the Supreme Court in the Privy Council jurisdictions. But apart from that, we effectively leave, we deal with Canada and Australia. But we leave the rest of the Commonwealth essentially to the Royal Courts of Justice, who are better resourced than we are and can afford to fly people to Nairobi and Johannesburg and so when we can't. We focus more on Europe. And we also organise, when it's a matter of meetings where we're representing the UK as a whole, for example, if we're having meetings with the European Court of Human Rights, where it's the UK rather than England that's the relevant party, then we will organise that and invite the English, Scottish and Northern Irish judiciaries to send representatives. So really the bulk of the work is done by the England and Wales judiciary. That's where the judicial office is situated. And if foreign delegations are interested in training, that's where I send them. Whereas we, as I say, have a more limited budget and we focus really on JCPC and Europe.
Any other questions? Shall we start from the back? Yeah, please go ahead.
First, I'd like to thank the speaker and Reed and organizing for this very interesting seminar. My earlier question, I come from a country that's been ruled by the dictator more than 42 years. We went through the Arab Spring. But after 14 years now, we have two governments, one parliament that is extended more than 10 years, and a case now in the country for someone who killed 1,200 prisoners of conscience. The tribes and politicians trying to release them. And imagine that happening in this world now. My question is, the Honourable Speaker and the global network as well, Is there any collaboration to help these countries to improve their application of law and order in every aspect? That would be useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Before we could respond, can you please specify which country it is?
I think it's very from some, it's in Libya.
Libya, perfect. I think the Global South Network, when it comes to these kind of issues, we are very much looking forward to collaborating with Supreme Court of Libya and the higher judiciary. And the same we want to do with that, with other countries when it comes to Libya, Sudan, Jordan, Lebanon, because we do think that it's important to know the perspectives. The only challenge we come across is that when we try to highlight one perspective, and just like the Honourable Judge Alex Team rightly mentioned, judicial populism, then all people like start clapping. Yeah, well done. It's a very good thing you're doing. Fantastic. We support you. And then you try to bring the other perspective, then they start condemning you, that they start feeling like, you're betraying us because we are kind of a traitor or what. I will give you a very simple example. In May, we organized the President Supreme Constitutional Court Palestine guest lecture. Everybody was saying, fantastic, it's a very good thing you're doing. I was receiving a lot of emails, congratulation emails. But when we brought the next guest lecture was of Justice Lutheran in the Supreme Court of Israel, and everything changed. It's very difficult to understand that why it would be a problem to start with Palestine and end at Israel. Especially for the network, we do not take sides. Let this be very clear. We're not going to say like, this government is good, this government is right, because let's be very clear, let's be very practical. If you have grievances against somebody, the first thing you need to do is to engage with that entity. And when you engage, the best possible way is to talk and negotiate. And that is exactly you did. In the last week, whatever is happening in the Middle East. After months and months of fighting, you ultimately sat around the table, talked, and only then you achieved. And that is exactly what we are going to do. We talked about Libya, give us some time, and hopefully we will come up with something. Any further questions? Okay, please.
Question for the Honourable Reed. From that perspective, what steps can the young professional and international students who are based in this country can take to promote the democracy, enhancing the welfare, and combating the corruption in developing countries?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I have any special authority to answer your question. I think you probably can answer it as well as I can. All one can do is behave well oneself and encourage other people to behave well. It's very difficult where there is a culture of corruption. And for example, there are many countries where there is a problem of corruption in the judiciary. it's a problem that's been raised at the meetings that we have had with the judges of another country. I won't embarrass them by naming country, but they were quite frank about the problem. And what we discussed with them were a number of things. One was ways of trying to inculcate better behaviour, trying to make people understand better what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And for example, take a simple example, the judge accepting a lift to work from the prosecutor who was going to be appearing before him that day. Not a good idea, but people wondered what's the matter with it. I remember being asked at a meeting with judges from a particular country, what sort of watch did I wear? That was the Air Centre, it was whatever the Air Centre who was organising this discussion. And she asked the native judge, what sort of watch do you wear? And I forget if it was a Rolex or an Omega. And then asked me, what sort of watch do you wear? And I said, well, I wear a very ordinary watch. It's about 50 years old. It was my father's. What sort of car do you drive? And the native judge had an S-Class Mercedes. What sort of car do I drive? And it was a 10-year-old Volvo. And she was trying to get over the message that the UK is a country where prestige doesn't depend on material possessions. And if you're a judge in a relatively poor country, where the only way of getting a Mercedes S-Class or a Rolex watch is to take bribes, then you need to change your ideas about what's important in life and see that, you know, possessing the Mercedes or the Rolex isn't really what being a judge is supposed to be about at all. So part of it, as I say, was trying to inculcate better behaviours and a bit of a change with culture. The other aspect of it that we went into with this country was looking in much more detail at how judges are appointed and what mechanisms exist for discipline and removal. And that has resulted in changes in that country and indeed in the arrest of some judges who previously, I think, would have felt their positions were secure. So, I mean, there are things that can be done. They need we're not, it's rather like with the question about Libya. We're not in a position to strong-arm people. They have to be willing to change and wanting to change, and we can then give them advice about how to go about it. But if there isn't that, then I'm afraid if you're on your own in your country and these behaviours are going on, all you can do is be a good example for yourself and hope to encourage other people to behave better.
I think they also and no. Okay, let's start with the one who is sitting at the back, and then we'll go to the online, and then we'll come back to you, Ed. Go ahead, please. Please try to be very brief. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello. I just wanted to thank you today for the insightful events as well. And moving on to my question, I was wondering, how do you think AI will transform the future of law and transportation, and what steps can be taken to ensure countries with fewer resources are not left behind in its adoption?
Yeah. Someone has a similar question. You can also add to this question. I can get back to you separate.
I think that's a very good question. On the first part of the question, I think AI offers many opportunities. It also presents risks. the challenge is to make the most of the opportunities while minimizing the risks. The opportunity, I think, is above all to improve access to justice by essentially making it cheaper to get access to justice. AI ought to make the process much more efficient, and it ought to reduce costs. But there are certainly risks. There are risks even in a country like this. You may know the EU has recently adopted an Artificial Intelligence Act, which is designed to, it prohibits the use of AI in areas of the highest risk. For example, criminal sentencing. If you are being asked to use a risk assessment, a tool which will assess the risk of re-offending, and you have no way of knowing how it operates, and you're just asked to take it on trust. That sort of thing is forbidden by the EU Act, which I think is a good idea, and I hope we would do the same. As I say, there are many other ways it can be used very well. I think there is a real problem for developing countries in getting equal access to it. It should reduce costs in the long term, but the upfront costs of acquiring it is going to be high. It's dominated by a handful of corporations, mostly in the United States. It's something which, in fact, when we discussed it at the J20 in Brazil, concern was expressed by the Chief Justice of South Africa about this very point, about how, on their resources, would they be able to make available generally to their judges. So there is a problem there. One has to hope that it will become like the IT like mobile phones, which are very expensive when they were first invented, but now everybody has one. So it remains to be seen. At the moment, it's certainly a problem. I mean, just today I'm dealing with a problem because we have a service that provides us with press cuttings every day. It's not literally cuttings; it's a summary of news stories, so that we can identify at a glance which stories concern us and find out what they're saying. But it's completely inaccurate because they're using some sort of chat bot the agency, they're using some sort of chat bot to produce the summaries, and it's a piece of nonsense. You probably know that there are lawyers who've been getting into trouble for putting in arguments in court which refer to non-existent cases. I mean, the machine seems to want to please you. And so if you have a case in court, it can't find a real case that supports your argument, it will just invent one. And we've had to consider whether to introduce rules of court about this, sort of kinds that have been introduced from Canadian provinces. I haven't done so far on the basis that a lawyer has a responsibility in any event for the accuracy of what they're putting in front of the court. It needs a special rule for AI. So anyway, I think it has the potential to be a great boon. I think the upside possibilities outweigh the downside risks, but we do need to be careful about the risks.
Okay, very simple. Thanks. Thank you very much. My question relates to perceptions about the legitimacy of the courts, even in this jurisdiction, against the backdrop of pressures on them, the tabloid media, misinformation that might be just referred to, I think. Now, in your very interesting presentation, thank you for which you referred to what I would refer to as a press unit established, perhaps, within the context of the EKCP report. And I think the same has been done at the European Court of Human Rights. I just wanted to invite you to comment upon that a little bit more, if you're able to do so, and what the driving forces are. I'm assuming, I may be wrong, that this comes against the backdrop of disinformation, poor reporting of certain judicial decisions, and efforts to correct that. The bigger issue being that the perceptions of the legitimacy of the judiciary are absolutely crucial for their acceptance in society generally. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You're absolutely right. Trust is vital to our role. And there is interesting evidence in the form of an opinion poll that was done for the Economist magazine not very long ago, which showed that amongst people who said that they knew a fair amount about the Supreme Court, the proportion who said they had a high degree of confidence that it would do its job well was 84%. So amongst people who know about us, it's a very high level of confidence. Amongst the people who said that they didn't know much about the court, the level of confidence was 52%. It's still, actually by European standards, 52% is a high figure, but it's nowhere near 84. So it's clear that essentially the more people know about us, the higher the level of confidence they have. So that's really that thinking that underpins our effort to improve public understanding. It takes a number of forms. We have an education team, we have an outreach team, but the communications team deal particularly with the media. They identify journalists who regularly cover the court. They allow those journalists to see most of our judgments on an embargo basis the day before the judgment is handed down. And they will answer the journalists' questions about the judgment. And the idea is that that enables the journalists instantly to give accurate reporting when the judgment is delivered. Now, we don't do that in cases where the temptation to break the embargo would be too good to resist. And in those cases, we take particular care. In every case when we hand down judgment, we do it publicly, and we issue the judgment itself online. But to camera, one of the judges will give a short explanation in ordinary language of what the court has decided and why. And in a case of media interest, we take particular care over that. So, to give you an example, when we handed down the Rwanda judgment, which I had written, I did the hand down. I took advice, I drafted what I was going to say, but I then ran it past our comms people to see if they had any comments on my language, because what I might think is ordinary language that anyone would understand isn't necessarily completely accurate. So they came back with one or two cases where they said, you could make that perhaps a bit simpler. They also impress on me the fact that while what I say is going to be carried on the BBC News, the ITN News, they'll only play a clip of maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So you want to try to find a sentence which encapsulates what we want to say. So that's sort of, frankly, left to my own devices, I don't know if I would have thought of that. So having a professional comms team can be very useful in giving you advice. It's not about spin, it's about how to communicate so that we explain to the interested member of the public what we're doing and why. And I think it's made the reporting of our cases has become much more accurate than it used to be. And I think it's largely down to these efforts that we're making to help journalists, because once upon a time you could expect them to take the time to read what you'd said and produce their own report of it. But the time pressures on them are now such that it's really much more likely that you'll get an accurate report if you feed it to them yourself.
Thank you. One last question. Please try to be brief. This is the last question.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Brian. And my question normally is, I'm from the Global South, and I've heard that there's a lot of support that comes from the United Kingdom to that part of the world. So I'm thinking, in what way has the United Kingdom borrowed from the Global South to enrich its judicial system, because it's a collaborative effort?
I think I would need a little time to give you a list. I'll tell you the very first thing that comes into my mind, because as my wife would say, I'm a rather sad man who's obsessed with law. And the first thing that came into my mind is that we had a case recently from the Caribbean about the relationship between arbitration and insolvency procedure. And we decided, and the Caribbean court had refused to follow an English precedent in the Court of Appeal. And indeed, the English precedent had itself already been followed by the courts in Singapore, I think Australia. Anyway, we looked at it. We thought the Caribbean court was right. And this is a JCPC case. So we exercise the power that we have when we give judgment in a JCPC case to say that it's also going to be a binding authority for the UK. So that's a case where a judgment by a court in the Caribbean has influenced us, and it's now the law for the UK. I wouldn't be surprised if it's followed now by other countries around the world. That's if you like, that's a trivial example, but that kind of influence is by no means unknown. If I look at it more widely, the examples when I was speaking a moment ago about the admiration that I have for the courage of judges who are doing their job under far more difficult circumstances than I am, that's a big influence on me. When we decide a case like the Rwanda case, I think to myself, well, I may be in for a hard time in tomorrow's newspapers. That's the worst I have to worry about. Some of these judges have to worry about their lives, or their children's lives, or their wife's life. So they're an inspiration to me. I don't have to say a lot more if I thought about it, but there you are. They can be a legal influence, and they can also be a moral inspiration.
Thank you very much for the questions, and thank you very much, Honourable Reed, President of the Supreme Court, for your answers.